Hi everyone, it's Rax. Continuing the series of hopefully very helpful videos for you in Last Epoch. 2 days ago we did the ultimate loot filter. Yesterday I told you how to auto sort your stash and have everything perfectly go into all of its right spots without trying. And today I'm going to try to tackle a very big subject but make it really simple: crafting. So crafting in Last Epoch is pretty amazing. I think whether people love Last Epoch or hate it, most would agree that its crafting system is one of the best, if not the best, of any ARPG. So I don't have any notes here in front of me. What I was going to do is just very quickly and methodically tell you everything that I know about crafting and just try to pass along the knowledge. I mean, that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you about just some basics about crafting before we actually look at all of the different glyphs and all of the different runes and how they could help you. So let's clear this out. I don't know why it's not clearing it out. Put this in here. Can we clear it? There we go. All right. So when you throw an item in here to craft on, the first thing is you can't craft on set items. The only thing you can do is shatter them. And you can't craft on unique items, except some of the woven echoes will let you re-roll the tiers of the, not the tiers, the ranges of the affixes if you have the same unique item in a certain woven echo. Another thing about uniques is if they have something called legendary potential, which would be right here, for example, one legendary potential, you can slam it, which means combine it with an exalted item, and then you can gain however many of its powers of its affixes based upon how much legendary potential is on it. So for example, these wing guards have one legendary potential. I need to find an exalted pair of gloves, has to be the same base. You run the Temporal Sanctum, and as long as you run at least tier 2 or higher, there's 4 tiers, they get harder and harder. As long as you run at least tier 2, then you're guaranteed to pick at least one of the affixes that will transfer. So I could put like T7 health on these wing guards, and that essentially encapsulates the crafting for uniques and sets. That's about it, maybe with a few exceptions. Most of the crafting that you will do in Last Epoch is on exalted items. That's for 2 reasons. First is sometimes it's just good to wear exalted items. Sometimes there isn't like a best in slot unique, for example. The other reason is for exactly what I just explained. You need to make really, really good exalted items in order to slam them into your uniques to make the best legendaries in the game. For example, I made a very, very good sword to slam into this sword. I'm guaranteed the T7 spell damage, but the crit chance is actually not what I wanted. I crafted an entire exalted sword trying not to get the crit chance as the second affix, and I lost. That's part of the game. If you lose sometimes, then if you can never lose, then you aren't actually playing a game, right? So with this in mind, now I'm going to go through and probably just systematically explain to you what these things do, and probably more importantly, how do I actually use this in my gameplay and what's my thinking on it. So Glyphs of Hope is probably the thing I use by far the most often. This just gives everything that you craft 25% chance to have no forging potential cost. Everything is real easy to understand. When you put something in the forging potential is like crafting juice. When this hits 0, you can no longer craft on it. So the chance to not consume your forging potential at all when you do an action is quite huge. So I use these when I'm crafting and upgrading stuff all the time, and I still have 705 of them. So you can use these to your heart's content. Glyphs of Chaos level up an affix and change what that affix is. This can be extremely valuable. So, for example, let's say I was making this sword and I'm trying to make it so I can slam it into a future sword here. So what I want over here is spell damage and melee attack speed. So spell damage is already here, so I would never chaos this off. If I click the upgrade and let it roll, it's going to change the spell damage into something else. That's exactly what I don't want to happen. Unfortunately, you cannot craft on an exalted item. Well, actually, you kind of can. We'll get into that later. But essentially, you can't upgrade or downgrade with one click of a button here exalted affixes. So this is kind of fixed unless I do anything really tricky. But let's just pretend for a moment that this sword only had rank 1 melee physical damage. What I could do here is chaos it off, and I'd select this one, and I'd try to get something that I need, like melee attack speed. Let's just make something up. Let's say that this was melee attack speed, and this was spell damage. This is already quite beautiful. So I could Glyph of Hope this to tier 5, and now I got to work on my suffixes, and I take a look, and both of these are stun chance. Let's say that's not what I want. Well, then you can just chaos it off and try to get like fire penetration, because that's what I'm playing. So chaos is just used to change affixes that you don't want, hopefully to something that you do want. That's the main use anyway. So Glyph of Order, I don't use these too often. It's a little bit more advanced. So it prevents the roll of an affix within its range when it is upgraded. So I think what this means is you look at the spell damage here. It's plus 13 from 12 to 14. Let's say it was perfect. Let's say it was 14 of 14. If you use this and you upgrade it, it should not change within its affix range. So in plain English, what that means is if you have a stat that you really like and you notice before you upgrade it that it's already at its maximum for its range, then you could use this while you're upgrading. Remember, when you choose this, you are foregoing this. This is costing between 1 and 24 forging potential. Could cost me 24 just to hit this and upgrade it, right? So sometimes if you're very low on potential and you still have a lot of other crafting to do on the other side, you can craft it all the way up to tier 5. Sometimes it's better just to keep the Glyph of Hope, which I think is what most people do. Glyph of Despair. Now this one has a very, very tricky functionality. So you can seal an affix instead of upgrading it, and it moves off of the item down here and stays here forever. So there's two ways that you can think about this. The obvious way and the simple way is just if you are making, let's say, a body armor, and you have like a very, very low, like tier 1 stun chance, and that's not what you want. You want fire pen, let's say. Instead of gambling with Glyph of Chaos, you can use a Glyph of Despair to seal it off. So it will disappear and leave this slot open. It will go right here. Now you can just go back to Glyph of Hope and manually craft fire pen and craft it all the way up to tier 5. And now you got it for free. But the tricky thing about Glyph of Despair is, let's say you find an exalted sword that's tier 7, so literally this one, with something that you don't want on it. Exactly this one. And again, let's say over here we have tier 1 stun chance. And if we magically got tier 7 fire pen, that would be really good. But I can't get tier 7 fire pen. It's not possible because I can't craft this up to 5, right? Well, there is a trick. You could seal this off, craft rank 1 fire pen, and then there's another thing later on that, let me find which one it is. I always get lost about where they are. This one, the Rune of Havoc. And it shuffles the tiers of the non-sealed affixes. So if I used a Rune of Havoc right here, and this was T1 Fire Pen, it might move the T7 melee physical, which I don't want, over to the fire pen, and then that tier 1 might move over here. If that happens, and I have a lot of forging potential, then you could go in here and chaos off the melee physical damage, because what I really want is melee attack speed. And then if you're feeling actually really crazy, you could actually try to Rune of Havoc it back to the tier 7 over there. The possibilities are endless. The thing that I want you to keep in mind is Glyph of Despair has a very high chance to seal it off if it's the lower the tier of the affix is. So tier 1 is very easy to seal off. Tier 2, you have a pretty good chance it's worth going for. Tier 3 is pretty rare, and I don't even try to seal a tier 4. It's like never going to happen. You're just going to gobble your potential for no reason. And you also, if you fail the despair, it levels it up. So you can't just willy-nilly keep trying. It's leveling it up, so you're running out of chances. So in conclusion, with the Glyph of Despair, use it to seal off low-level crap that you don't want in order to craft something that you do want. And then if you have a tier 7 Exalt, consider using a Rune of Havoc to then move the T7 affix to that little rank 1 baby thing that you just crafted. Final step would be chaosing off the piece of shit tier 7 affix, which is now a lower one, to something that you need. If all of this is feeling overwhelming, there are that's kind of like the beauty of Last Epoch, that it's simple. You just seal it off and craft something else. But there's like endgame strategies in order to make really, really awesome items. I have made godly items following exactly like this flow that I just explained to you. Glyph of Envy is kind of interesting. So it siphons stability off of an item in order to further advance the timeline that you're in. So it's kind of a way to like run a bunch of maps without using maps if you want to like just gobble up like a garbage item to advance your monolith thing. I usually don't even use this. I usually just play, but it's definitely an option there. It's like probably good for like leveling alts, but they also made leveling alts way easier now as well. Now you only have to do like one empowered timeline or something and then you're done. So they made that a lot easier as well. I don't use this very much, but it's there. Okay, now let's get to the runes. Rune of Shattering. Runes of Shattering are really, really good for building your affix pool so you can craft stuff. So anything like the loot filter does a lot of work here for you if you're following my universal loot filter. Anything in orange for me here is got decent affixes that I would want, but it's not an exalted item. If it's not an exalted item, I'll never wear it, and I literally can't slam it. You can only slam an exalt. Not that I would ever slam a non-exalt anyway. So whenever I see orange drop on the ground, I just pick it up and I just shatter it. And I just grab all of the affixes from it, a portion of the affixes from each one. And that's all there is to it. Let me skip over to removal next. Removal picks one random affix and gives you all of the shards for it. So shatter targets everything. And for stun chance, it would give you between 0 and 3 stun chance shards, 0 to 7 melee fizz, 0 to 4 spell damage, 0 to whatever the tier of that affix is. Removal always gives you all of them, but it randomly chooses one at a time. So the awesome thing about removal is when my loot filter drops these orange items and I see that they're blue, they're not yellow, that means there's only 2 affixes on it. So my chance to hit the removal and get all of the affixes on that very, very rare, or all of the shards for that very rare affix that I'm looking for is quite easy. It's a 50-50. Sometimes it's a 100%. Sometimes the blue item only has 1 stat. So in conclusion, I use shattering when there's 4 affixes, and I use removal when there's less than 4 affixes, or if I'm direly needing, like if one of the affixes has 0, I don't have any in my bank, then I'll just spam removal until I hit all of them. One final thing to consider for removal is you probably don't want a removal if the affix tier is very low for what you're looking for. So let's say I really need melee physical damage shards, but it's only tier 1. Well, if you removal it, you're only going to get 1. Might as well just shatter it. It's kind of the distinction there. Rune of Refinement is very easy to understand. It rerolls the values of all the affixes within their tiers. So if we look at this, if we selected a refinement and we held Alt here, look at on the left side, if we look at the sword, we have 64 melee fizz, and the range of it right below it, it goes from 51 to 65. So that's already really, really good. So I would never refine this. I only refine an item if it's like a T7 Exalt, and I specifically refine it for the T7 affix. I want the T7 to be perfect, usually. If the T7 is perfect, then the only way I would consider using a refine again is if that range truly didn't matter and there was another T5 affix that rolled at the bottom of its range that I wanted to improve for the slam. Usually, 99% of the time, you only refine like a T7 Exalt to get the specific T7 affix at the top of its range. I would also heavily advise you, unless you're slamming it into a 1 LP, like you're just moving the T7 guaranteed onto the unique, do a Rune of Refinement always last, because you need to craft up all the other affixes too. It's like if you're doing a 2 LP slam or higher, or if you're going to wear it, it's way better to fix all the other affixes on the item than it is to get a 1 or 2 more melee fizz damage on this item. The exception there is if you're just slamming it into a 1 LP, then literally the only thing that matters is the T7, and then you can spam the refinement until you get a very good roll. Rune of Discovery is god tier in the early game, pretty much almost completely useless in the end game. What it does is you just take an item and it's got some openings. Any item that has openings, and you throw in a Rune of Discovery, and it will just simply fill it up with affixes. And it does not cost any forging potential, so it's completely for free. So if you want to YOLO it and you want to just fill up the affixes, this is godly in the early game. Like in the campaign, you get a sword, it's got 2 affixes, and you just want to throw 2 random ones on there. Rune of Discovery. I do this all the time in the campaign. Not so many uses in the end game, really. Rune of Shaping just rerolls the implicits on an item. The implicits are the things at the very top. So if we hold Alt and look at the very top, the melee damage on the purple sword is guaranteed to be 40. The melee elemental damage is from 40 to 100, and I rolled 63. So that's like below average. And then 9% melee attack speed is toward the bottom. So I got below average and then pretty much the bottom. So my implicits suck here. Still, I usually don't find myself using this all that often. The implicit is going to have to really, really matter, and it's going to have to be a terrible roll for a Rune of Shaping to be worth the forging potential. But it's there if your whole item is perfect and the implicits suck. I usually kind of only use this in the end game. Maybe an example of where an implicit would really matter is like it's very common to level up as rogue with a Shadow Dagger Falconer, right? Well, when you hit level 27, you get the Chris weapons, and the Chris's roll, I believe, between 35 and 65 crit multi as an implicit. Well, getting that extra 30 crit multi on both daggers is absolutely insane, because you're guaranteed to crit with the Shadow Daggers on the Umbral Blades. They always crit. So 30 crit multi for throwing 1 Rune of Shaping on there is insane. So in the campaign, if I find my first Chris and it's got 35 crit multi, it's actually, I maybe Discovery it. If I don't hit a God affix, I'll just Rune of Shaping it to move the 35 closer to 65, as one example. Rune of Ascendance, very, very simple. when you want to target farm a unique that isn't a boss drop, let's say wing guards, for example, all you do is you set your loot filter to recolor it a certain color. So like items to ascend, I don't need to ascend anything right now, but because I unchecked the rule. But I was looking for rings and I was ascending rings and I was making sure that the faction's circle of fortune was checked if you're playing SSF, because there's a power there on the circle of fortune faction that says you have a 45% chance for runes of ascendance to be preserved when used on an item that requires at least COF 1. So what does all of that mean? What it means is if you pick the SSF faction, sometimes you will find items that were given to you from the SSF faction. Let me find one here. Just had one. This one. The way that I know that this one is the SSF faction is in the bottom right corner where it says rank 5. See that little purple eye by it? That's how I know. It requires rank 5 in SSF. So what this Rune of Ascendance does is it takes any item, like a yellow or a blue or a gray or whatever, or an exalt, anything, and it upgrades it to a unique. And you just hit the slot machine. You try to hit the unique that you're looking for. But you don't just want to ascend every pair of gloves that you find. You want to ascend the gloves that require at least rank 1 Circle of Fortune, which is SSF solo self-found. That way you have a 45% chance to preserve it, which means that you just have way more runes of ascendance to keep trying and trying and trying. This is one of the easiest ways to get all of your uniques for your build, at least your starter uniques. I don't believe it works on boss-specific drops like in the end game, but any regular item that you might be looking for, it should work. And luckily, I do have a Maxroll guide up here. I want to show you one more trick with the Maxroll guide. If you did not know this, this is a huge hint. If you pick any guide here, if you mouse over a unique, it'll tell you your chances of getting a wing guard at the bottom in orange with a Rune of Ascendancy is 1 in 19. You do it 19 times, you should get a wing guard. Another thing is if you go to aspirational and you pick like this body armor, for example, which is now turned into a legendary. When I scroll down, you don't see a Rune of Ascendancy chance. It means you cannot Ascendancy this item. Can you Ascendancy the sword? You sure can, and it's a 1 in 11 chance. Can you Ascendancy this ring? No. Can you Ascendancy this ring? Yes, it's a 1 in 15 chance. So, little trick if you did not know that. Okay, let's keep going here. Don't want to make the video too long. Rune of Weaving, very easy to understand. All it does is advance your Weaver's Will, so you don't have to wait for it. If you don't know what that is, when you find an item with Weaver's Will, like this one, you equip the sword and you play with it, and the Weaver's Will, it starts at 9. It's going to tick down, and it's going to start vomiting extra affixes onto the item and start leveling it up. The problem is, in order to do that, you got to take off your real sword and play with this piece of shit, and you don't even know what you're going to get. That system kind of sucks, right? Like, you have to give up a great piece just to see what this gets. So Last Epoch said, okay, we hear you, no problem. You put this in, and then you use the Rune of Weaving, and boom, the Weaver's Will went down, and oh, it gave me tier 5 fire damage. Okay, you do it one more time. Okay, chance to shock. If I had played with it for an hour, this is how it would have ended up. It just saves you time. You don't have to guess, and usually it doesn't end up being what you want, and that's fine. We go again. Rune of Havoc, we already talked about this. It shuffles the tiers of the affixes, not with the seal. It shuffles it between these 4. So the idea is get a T7 of any affix, like this one. I don't need melee fizz at all, but here it is, T7 sword. Then put something that you want on the sword. Put stuff that you want everywhere else. I want spell damage. If this was T7 spell damage, this would be God tier. Then you use the Havoc to shuffle them around, and you're praying that the T7 moves to the spell damage. Remember, if the T7 moves to the spell damage, and let's say the T3 moves to the melee fizz, now you can chaos this off, try to get what you want. So it's not just as powerful as the 7 moves off. When the 7 moves off, you might be able to craft on this now, where you otherwise could not. Big possibilities there to make a godly item. Rune of Redemption. Ugh, sorry, my voice cracked. I'm still going through puberty. Randomly changes the exalted affixes on an item into different ones. I think that this would be good for the double exalts. And when you get double exalts, they never have good stats on them, like ever. So this gives you a chance to change them into something good, kind of YOLO it. Admittedly, I haven't really used this too much yet, but this is kind of like an end game thing to try to make more T7, more T7s that you really want to either wear or slam into. Now, the final thing, I know what this is. I think it's the Rune of Creation. This is the best rune by far, which is why I don't have any of them. And by the way, I just don't have any of them. I've never found one the entire season. So they're pretty damn rare. And I believe how it works is what it will do is any item that you have in here, it will copy it. However, you need to have forging potential on the item. And when you copy it, it will set the forging potential of your item to 0, instantly 0. And the copy will also be 0. So what does that mean? It's extremely powerful if we understand what it does. It copies an item, sets both forging potentials to 0, which means that we can never craft on it ever again. It's like a Mirror of Kalandra in PoE 1. And this is extremely valuable for endgame slamming. I do think I have an example here in my ring thing here. So let's look at this ring. This ring is straight from Mount Olympus. It's got T7 elemental damage over time, which is my best stat. It has T5 healing effectiveness. That's my second best stat. And it's got T5 health, which is like my next best stat. T5 dodge rating would be a rip, but T5 dodge rating that's not the worst thing I've ever heard of. I mean, I'll take it, but that's not what I want. You can see, by the way, look, I did tricky things to craft this ring. Remember, I told you seal it off, shuffle the affixes, chaos stuff off. That's exactly what I did to make this ring straight from the heavens. If you notice, both of my rings have legendary potential, but I haven't slammed anything into them. Do you want to know why? Because I still have forging potential on this ring, and I don't have a Rune of Creation. And I'm not slamming it until I get that Rune of Creation. Because when I copy this, sets the forging potential to 5, I'll have 2 of them. I'll have 2 rings from Mount Olympus to slam into my rings, and I'm guaranteed to get the T7 elemental damage over time on both, for sure. And I'm going to try to get either the T5 healing effectiveness or T health as well. I have a 66% chance to hit the miracle on each try of the ring. But notice how when I make a godly item, I don't just go in and slam it right away. Patience is a virtue. Wait until you get one, copy it, boom, and then you can do it twice. It's extremely powerful, which is why this ring is just sitting here. If I made an exalted sword with T7 spell damage and like T6 or T7 melee cast speed, you bet your ass I would put it in my stash and wait until I got a Rune of Creation to copy it to give me 2 chances. Because the odds of you making another one like that are not very good. That's why it's sitting right here. That's why I'm just dreaming of the day that the Rune of Creation drops for me. And that's pretty much it, guys. I went through all of the glyphs. I talked about the different item types. That's not true. There's one item type I didn't talk about. Now you can enchant your class-specific idols. And the way that you do that is you just go into the monoliths and you do like the cemeteries. And at the end, you just throw it in there. It crafts 1 affix. and then it applies Weaver's Will to the item. So it gives you one thing that you can see, the armor and the armor mitigation, and then you play and see what else you get. So again, if you don't want to wait, you can just Rune of Weaving it and see if the second thing is what you want. And if it isn't, you can just re-enchant it. So you can see here on this one, I enchanted it with damage over time and endurance. Not the greatest thing ever, but it helps me. Then my Weaver's Will actually just fed into it and didn't give me a second affix, which is interesting. So it's decent, but not great. And this one, I crafted 6% armor and armor mitigation. That's really good. And then it gave me Electrify and Lightning Pen. Completely useless to me on the Weaver's Will. So when I'm feeling frisky, I'll probably re-enchant this and try to YOLO the perfect stats there. And yeah, I think that is it. That is a crafting overview of at least all of the basics on what you can do in this game. There is very likely that I missed something, like I missed some key crafting advice. If any of you guys are watching this video and I missed a big hint, if you would do me a favor, please post it in the comments. I'll give it a heart. I'll give it a thumbs up, try to push it to the top if I missed anything. And I just want you guys to enjoy the game and enjoy how things work. So I would be curious to know, does this video help you? Was this overview and some of these strategies, did you get anything out of it? Or are you watching this like, I wanted to watch Rax's crafting video and I already knew all that shit. Like that was a waste of my time. And I don't know, maybe I don't plan on doing this like every single season, but maybe after a couple of seasons, you know, they add new crafting things and the strategies change. For example, the what's it called? Glyph of Insight. Is that what it was called? The one with the experimental things? That thing completely changed. As one example. And now we can enchant our idols. Anyway, let me know, guys. The next video I'll make is probably an endgame Weaver tree. And I found at least one strategy. It's very simple to get a shitload of items and a shitload of XP. And also to make it really fun. You have a ton of power when you do this, and it's hilarious. And then maybe I'll make some endgame judgment guides. If you want to, I'm about to fight Uber Aberos soon. I can make a guide on that. Let me know what guides would help you, and I'll be happy to make them. Thank you.